Thrones, The Simpsons, and Scrubs were considered must-watch television for many years, making their inevitable decline more crushing. With that said, there have been a couple of dramas, sitcoms, and cartoons that were great from beginning to end, never suffering a single dip in quality. However, there are a few shows with one single clunker that stops them from having a perfect track record. I'm Ellie for What Culture, and let's take a look at these great TV shows with only one bad episode. Starting with Beer Bad, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The creators behind Buffy the Vampire Slayer had a knack for crafting brilliant storylines from outrageous ideas. For example, Hush, which is mostly dialogue-free, was nominated for an Emmy, and musical episode Once More with Feeling is among the show's biggest highlights. As a result, the writers should have had little trouble doing something innovative with the episode Beer Bad, where Buffy's gang regresses to a caveman state after consuming enchanted alcohol. But rather than exploring nuanced metaphors and complex themes, the episode boils down to, as the title states, that beer bad. Adding insult to injury, Buffy is sidelined for the most part. Instead of her trademark strength and moral complexity, the Sunnydale Slayer is reduced to slapstick humor and physical comedy. While Sarah Michelle Gellar commits to her performance, the joke wears thin quickly, and although Buffy the Vampire Slayer is renowned for its witty dialogue, the creators wrote themselves into a corner here since the heroes can barely form cohesive sentences. Buffy the Vampire Slayer has plenty of filler, but at least those episodes are entertaining. This, on the other hand, feels more like a PSA. Jacobasaurs, South Park. With over 300 episodes under its belt so far, South Park has maintained remarkable consistency. After almost 30 years, the most recent season has proven that Trey Parker and Matt Stone's crass cartoon is arguably even more relevant and popular than ever. However, South Park's winning streak makes its greatest failure more apparent. In 1999, Parker and Stone released an episode called Jacobasaurs, where Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Cartman encounter an obnoxious extraterrestrial. The titular alien parodies the divisive character Jar Jar Binks, who debuted in Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace less than a month before this episode aired. Now, to be fair, this idea had potential, since South Park has utilized deliberately annoying characters effectively on many occasions. But this episode doesn't work, since the joke never evolves beyond Jacobasaurs being unbearably annoying. The punchline is obvious, but it doesn't change the fact that listening to Jacobasaurs' squeaky voice for 20 minutes is sure to grate on anybody. Ironically, the creators' hatred towards Jar Jar Binks resulted in them forging a character that's arguably more infamous and more hated. Beard After Hours, Ted Lasso. Although the Ted Lasso series usually explores emotional conflicts between the titular coach, his employers, and his team, the Beard After Hours episode took things in a different direction, focusing on Ted's assistant, Willis Beard. Beard made an impression early on in the series, but came across like an enigma due to his laconic nature. With that in mind, having an entire storyline dedicated to his personal life sounded like an enlightening change of pace. Unfortunately, it was anything but. Structurally, Beard After Hours abandons relatable conflicts in favor of a surreal narrative. While experimentation can be healthy, this detour feels disconnected since it doesn't contain the warmth and humor Ted Lasso is renowned for. The episode's dreamlike logic, exaggerated coincidences, and extended set pieces lean toward indulgence rather than anything meaningful or revealing. Even though fans should have been excited about gaining some insight about Beard as a human being, nothing of importance is learned, even after watching him take part in wacky shenanigans for 43 minutes. While Beard After Hours may appeal to those who enjoy stylistic risks, this standalone oddity doesn't offer anything of merit. Black Market, Battlestar Galactica. 2004's Battlestar Galactica is a major departure from the original series, revising the cosmic robot Cylons into complex villains almost indistinguishable from humans. While the 1978 show was a cheesy space adventure, the reboot served as a dark reimagining that focused on realism, politics, and moral ambiguity. However, these qualities are nowhere to be seen in the Black Market episode. This soap opera plot explores illegal trading and gambling, which is small potatoes compared to the galactic war the spacefaring heroes deal with in every other episode. Not only is the story bare bones, but it relies too heavily on convenience. Corruption is exposed and murders occur, which should have long-lasting consequences. Instead, these issues are resolved quickly, stripping away any emotional weight. Worst of all, Commander Adama's characterization is deeply mishandled. Though Adama has always been portrayed as a master tactician who analyzes every angle of a situation, he comes across as naive and easily manipulated here, regressing in a way that feels unearned. There's no harm in skipping Black Market entirely, as the overarching narrative and characters aren't developed in any meaningful way. These Fragile Lives from John Griffin's sci-fi drama revolves around a mysterious town that traps anyone who enters, with deadly creatures stalking the residents at night. As the town's secrets slowly unravel, the newcomers form uneasy alliances and confront the unsettling forces controlling their fate. Everybody loves a solid mystery, but premises like this can fall apart since interest needs to be maintained while also not letting the cat out of the bag too early. Fortunately, From does a stupendous job of revealing little truths that repeatedly recontextualize the overall story without giving the game away. The characters are constantly evolving and finding themselves in gripping dilemmas, which should leave the audience thoroughly engaged. With that said, These Fragile Lives is an absolute slog. Rather than advancing major mysteries or deepening the central horror, much of its 50-minute runtime deals with meandering interactions and tedious dialogue. From is a slow burner, and it rarely feels boring, as each episode tends to conclude with a personal or narrative payoff. But nothing is learned or developed in These Fragile Lives, to the point where it could have been condensed into a 10-minute subplot. Pilot, Parks and Recreation. It's weird to learn that Parks and Recreation had a rocky start, considering it went on to be a beloved sitcom and launched several ensemble members into superstardom. In fact, Greg Daniels and Michael Schur's comedy has an honorable distinction, since its worst episode is the one that started it all. Instead of beginning with a bang, the pilot is awkward and uneven. The mockumentary style feels forced, and the humor relies on cringy circumstances rather than character-driven comedy. Speaking of which, the main characters in the pilot feel like pale imitations of what they became. Andy Dwyer is a whiny man-baby, Ron Swanson acts like a generic curmudgeon, and Leslie Knope comes across as a watered-down Michael Scott from The Office. None of the ensemble is defined or likable, making it hard to root for them. Additionally, the central plot feels small and uninspired. Although Parks and Rec regularly dealt with mundanities, kickstarting a new comedy with a storyline involving a construction pit is uninteresting, especially since it's explored poorly. In a way, it was a blessing in disguise, since the negative reaction incentivized the writers to step up their game, ensuring Parks and Recreation never dipped to that substandard level again. I've got Batman in my basement, Batman the Animated Series. One of the many reasons Batman the Animated Series stood out over its peers is that it wasn't patronizing. Although kid-friendly, the DC property didn't shy away from adult elements, including mental illness, divorce, animal testing, and domestic abuse. For this reason, Batman the Animated Series never felt like it was solely geared towards a younger demographic. Except that one time. In I've Got Batman in My Basement, 12-year-old Sherman rescues Batman, who's been rendered unconscious by the Penguin. With the Dark Knight out of commission, it's up to Sherman to save the day. The biggest issue with the episode is that it follows a group of children instead of the Caped Crusader, and the plot is filled with slapstick and exaggerated antics, undermining the show's grounded realism. As a result, the tension never feels genuine, and Batman himself is sidelined for much of the runtime. The Penguin is reduced to a simplistic threat, which is extra disappointing as the Rogue's first Batman the Animated Series appearance was here in this very episode. Though fans probably enjoyed I've Got Batman in My Basement as children, even co-creator Bruce Timm admitted this storyline represents everything Batman the Animated Series tried to avoid. Maisie Day, Black Mirror. Black Mirror feels like a modern version of The Twilight Zone, but with more emphasis on a technologically reliant society, impending doom, and humanity losing its humanity. Although each storyline explores thought-provoking ideas, not every one of them sticks the landing, including Metalhead, Striking Vipers, and Rachel, Jack, and Ashley too. Though somewhat disappointing, episodes like these shouldn't be classified as bad. However, Maisie Day isn't just bad, it's the outright low point of the sci-fi drama. Maisie Day starts like a critique of celebrity culture and paparazzi exploitation, which feels on brand for Black Mirror at first. Unfortunately, the episode abruptly pivots from gritty social drama to monster movie horror. Rather than deepening the plot, this twist feels gimmicky, as though it were borrowed from a different series altogether. The technology element is borderline irrelevant, leaving Maisie Day disconnected from Black Mirror's established motif. Because of this, the message becomes muddled, the tension dissipates, and the ending feels hollow rather than haunting. Even though Black Mirror has repeatedly juggled drastically different genres time and time again, the switch up here isn't just clumsy, it's pointless. Jubilee's Fairy Tale Theatre, X-Men the Animated Series. Rather than battling Magneto, Sentinels, or Apocalypse, this infamous X-Men the Animated Series storyline has Jubilee trapped in a cave with a group of children. To pass the time, she concocts a fairy tale where she envisions her mutant allies and foes as princes, trolls, and wizards. Although X-Men the Animated Series had its fair share of filler, this is the most egregious example. There's no real plot progression, stakes, or impact on the ongoing narrative. In a cartoon known for serialized storytelling and emotional arcs, this just feels like a total waste of time. Even though X-Men explored prejudice, trauma, and civil rights, Fairy Tale Theatre goes for kiddie humour, clashing with the established tone. This decision could be forgiven somewhat if it were executed well, but the jokes fall flat and the fairy tale plot is anything but inventive. And what's worse is that the budget was noticeably slashed just before this episode went into production. And as such, it suffers from limited animation, janky facial movements, and simplified backgrounds. The character of Jubilee received a lot of unnecessary hate throughout X-Men the Animated Series run, so it's frustrating how the worst episode also happened to be centered around her. And finally, remember the monsters, Dexter, and Sins of the Father, Dexter New Blood. Although a TV show should recover from one lousy episode, it's different when the singular dud happens to be the series finale. And few dramas prove this point better than Dexter. The crime drama centers around Dexter Morgan, a blood spatter analyst who hunts and murders serial killers to quell his own bloodlust. Even though the series had a marvelous run, Dexter came crashing down in its very last episode, where, after an insultingly brief confrontation with the season's big bad, our title character discovers that his sister Deborah has suffered a stroke, leaving her in a vegetative state. Not wanting her to suffer, Dexter puts his sis out of her misery before driving his boat into a hurricane, hoping to end his life. However, Dexter survives, leading him to start life anew as a lumberjack in a distant town. Instead of being meaningful, Deborah's demise felt like it was there solely for shock value, while Dexter's fate came across as jarring. To add further salt to the wounds, Dexter fumbled the final hurdle twice, as years later, the showrunners devised a continuation called Dexter New Blood, which follows Dexter succumbing to his primal urges once more. Against the odds, New Blood was actually a hit, offering well-written characters, compelling conflicts, and deep character growth. So consistent was Dexter New Blood, it felt like the wider Dexter IP had redeemed itself. Ironically though, the New Blood finale somehow managed to be even worse than the original series' final outing. Despite the Dexter character's established MO of only taking the lives of killers, he casts his moral code to the wind and slaughters an innocent police officer in New Blood's last episode. And rather than giving the main character any closure, Dexter is shot by his son and left for dead at the end of New Blood. Now, while Dexter Resurrection has been receiving plenty of praise since it premiered last year, fans are terrified that this will be another Dexter show that will eventually conclude in underwhelming fashion. So fingers crossed that does not happen again. Third time's the charm, right?